Welcome to Pastry Living. This is Aya. Today we are making cream puff. I'm spilling all the tips and tricks to make it successful at home, so make sure to watch it before you make it. Cream puff is originally called choux à la creme in French. It is a cute round shape made with the dough called pate, and it's filled with lots of cream. The word part just means like texture or dough, and the word choux means cabbage in French because it kind of looks like it. In this video, I'm going to start by explaining the baking science of why the cream puff actually rises so that I can give you a better understanding of all the crucial points I'm making in the following steps. And after that, I'm making the basic pate choux, explaining what to do and what not to do and why. And after that, as the filling, I'm making the cream called creme diplomat. It is made with pastry cream and whipped cream. Pate choux and this cream is just perfect match together. And next, I'm comparing all the different types of cream puffs with different ingredients so that you can enjoy many versions occasionally depending on what texture you want. And in the very end, I'm going to answer some of the most commonly asked questions to finish this video. I can already feel that this video is going to be a little bit longer than usual, but to give you a better understanding of all the important processes, I decided to explain in detail today. So stick with me. Let's get started. Alright, so there are the ingredients for pate choux today: water, milk, salt, sugar, butter, flour, and egg. Depending on the recipes, the ratios or the ingredients are slightly different, but they are like the basic gang. The steps are very simple. First, heat water, milk, salt, sugar, and butter in the pan and add flour to it, mix, and heat it up. And to that, add egg and mix. And finally, pipe on a tray and bake. Steps are pretty simple, but it can be very tricky without knowing all the crucial points. So let me briefly explain about how pate choux actually puffs up in the oven. There are many reasons for this, but there are three main factors. Number one, if it can create enough steam to actually push the dough up. The steam is created by liquids when they are heated. When the liquids turn into steam, as the temperature goes up in the oven, the volume expands about 7,100 times more. 7,100 times more. And that extremely strong power pushes up the dough. And the second factor is if the dough is very stretchy, for the dough to rise with the steam, the texture has to be very stretchy, just like a balloon. The air we blow to make a balloon is like a steam for pate choux. And for pate choux, starch and flour contributes a lot to make the stretchy texture, specifically when you heat liquids and starch for enough time. By doing that, starch gets more loose and stretchy like a glue. And also hot melted butter and liquids help to make the dough looser. And the last factor is if there's enough body or bone to sustain the shape after it's rising. Even if it rises, it shrinks if there's not enough bone to sustain the weight. And starch is just not strong enough to hold that shape. Gluten and flour do the job mainly. It is created by mixing liquids and flour together, and it creates a strong web that is going to completely set when it's cooked slow and become the bone. And also egg gets set completely when it's cooked and do the supportive job. So keep in mind of these three factors as we proceed to the demo. Let's start with preps. First, start by warming your egg with warm water. Make sure that the water is not too hot so that you are not cooking eggs. You just want to make it to room temperature or slightly warm like baby bath, depending on how fast you can move. And also sift flour. I recommend using a fine sieve so that it can eliminate all the flour lumps. Especially cake flour is very lumpy, so don't skip this part. Set a pastry tip in a pastry bag and set a silicone mat or parchment paper on the tray. One batch of the recipe makes about 12 cream puffs. I like to use flour and cookie cutter and make marks. So this cookie cutter is 6 centimeters. And lastly, preheat your oven. Once you start heating the pot after this, everything moves so quickly, you gotta move fast. So I recommend finishing all the preps in advance. And in a pot, add water and milk, add salt, sugar, And add butter and heat it with medium-high heat. Cut butter into smaller pieces so that by the time the water and milk are boiling, all the butter is melted already. When you add a big chunk of butter, you will need to wait until it melts and liquids can evaporate too much, potentially, which we do not want. So shake a pot sometimes and make sure that the butter is melted before the liquids are boiling. And to this we add flour, but because of the factor 2, it is important to boil water and milk all the way to cook the starch. Once you see it started simmering, turn the pot or mix with a spatula and make sure that the temperature is even so that you can judge better. As soon as you see milk and water are boiling hard like this, remove from heat and add flour right away before the temperature goes down. And immediately mix and let the flour absorb the hot liquids. We remove from heat while we do this just to make sure liquids are not evaporating too much or we are not burning anything. The starch in flour is not cooked quite enough yet at this point. For the starch to get very stretchy enough, we need to heat it to about 80 Celsius specifically. And you could insert a thermometer to check, but I don't do it since it's a little bit too troublesome for me. So I'll show you how I check later. So once it forms a ball like this, heat again with medium heat. You don't want to cook the same spot, so push it down like this and make it flat to cook flour evenly and repeat that. When you cook too long though, the liquids to create the steam goes out too much here. Once you see a thin skin is formed on the bottom of your pot, it is done. How long that takes depends on the amount of powder choux and the strength of the heat and so on, but with one batch of the recipe, it usually takes about 1 minute. And then immediately remove it from heat and move it to a mixing bowl. And we are adding eggs to it, but wait for just a second. Before that, I like to knead just a little bit with a paddle to make sure that it is even and kneaded well for about 30 seconds for one batch. By doing it, the dough also cools down just a tiny bit and it prevents eggs from cooking partially as well. But don't wait too long because we want the powder choux to feel still warm by the time we pipe them. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can do this with a spatula as well. Now add eggs and immediately mix. I like to add about 1/3 or a little less than a half amount of the egg. If you add a tiny amount, the egg can get cooked with the hot dough. It looks separated at the beginning, and especially when you are using a spatula to mix, it takes some time to get blended and you may feel nervous if this is ever gonna look right, but no worry, keep mixing and it gradually comes together. Add about a half amount of the rest when it is almost blended and repeat the same process one more time. I like to divide 3 times usually and maybe 4 times, but no more than that so that I can finish this process quickly to keep the dough warm. So depending on how much liquid was evaporated in the pot, which varies slightly by the size of the pot or the strength of heat, for example, the amount of egg you need to add varies slightly as well. So don't add all the eggs, save about 1 tablespoon or so that you can add later if you need to. Once you add too much egg, you cannot fix it, so it's safe to save it for now. When eggs are not added enough, the choux does not rise well, mainly because it cannot create enough steam. And when too many eggs are added, it spreads wider and cannot stand high. To check the consistency, first make sure that the dough is evenly mixed and scoop a lot with a spatula and hold it flat and drop. It should fall in 3 to 5 seconds depending on the amount and create the triangle here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It drops faster when it's heavier, so check a couple times to judge well and add more egg if you need to. When the eggs are cold at this point, the batter inside tightens up and the dough looks firmer and you cannot really judge well. Now pipe immediately and bake. Don't be afraid to pipe high to make tall, round cream puffs. Set your pastry tip high like this and squeeze from that position. And when you're done piping, swish to the side fast to cut off the dough. And apply egg wash. You can use whole egg or water. Apply evenly and gently so that you are not squishing the shape. By using a whole egg, the surface gets more firm and gets darker caramelization. With water, the surface gets softer with less caramelization. For me, with my oven, I like to add about the same amount of water to the whole egg since my oven tends to create strong caramelization. And I love attaching diced almonds all around the surface. It adds very nice crunchiness and it goes so well with the melty cream. And I love to sprinkle a good amount of sugar on top of almonds to add extra, very pleasant texture. That's my favorite combination, so try it out if you haven't yet. I'll leave the rest simple, just with egg wash. Apply egg wash right before you bake since it can get dried pretty quickly. And bake for about 20 to 25 minutes until you see nice caramelization all around. We need a big heat to create big steam explosion in the oven. You do not want to burn it, so once it's puffed up at this point, turn down the temperature to 365 Fahrenheit and bake for another 15 minutes or so to cook through the center. And as an option after that, stop the heat completely. You can open the door at this point if you want and close it and leave them in the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes or more to make them extra crispy. This is the technique a lot of the pastry chefs use. Just pay attention to the color so that you're not burning them. And it is very important not to open the door until the choux is cooked through, which usually takes about 20 to 30 minutes depending on the size of the oven. That is because by opening the door on the way, the power of steam drops suddenly and the choux collapses. And even if you heat them again, it's not quite the same. The steam has to start over again and it will not rise to where it was supposed to be. And this is also important. My oven unfortunately does not have this setting, but if your oven has, make the heat from the bottom stronger. It helps to push up the dough with the steam even more and the dough rises better. One of the reasons why gas oven is great for cream puff is that my electric convection oven unfortunately does not have the setting and the heat from the top is a little bit too strong for my liking, but still it's possible to bake them nicely. So play around and adjust the time and temperature accordingly with your oven. Now let's make creme diplomat. Today I am using my pastry cream recipe. I created the tutorial before, so check out the video to learn how to make them more in detail. For creme diplomat, I love to add a lot of vanilla beans. It gets extra delicious. And let it completely cool, which takes some time, so I recommend making pastry cream first before baking powdered choux and finish the cream in the end. Once it is completely cooled, it'll look lovely like this, so mix it well until it gets looser and shinier, like this. I like to whip until it gets very fluffy and stiff to make the cream that is easy to pipe and hold shapes well. Now add 1 big scoop of that to the pastry cream and mix until it gets even. When you need to blend too two different components, always add about 1/3 to the firmer one, mix and add the rest. That way, two can blend easier than adding that to a softer one. The richness from pastry cream and fluffiness of whipped cream makes the amazing, melty, light cream. There are two ways to pipe. You can either make a hole on the bottom and squeezing from there, or cut the top and pipe inside. Fill a lot of creams to make it look extra gorgeous and delicious. When you use only water, the color gets lighter and the texture gets softer. On contrary, when you use only milk, the caramelization gets very strong and the texture gets firmer and the flavor gets stronger as well. When you use oil instead of butter, the texture gets lighter and softer, but the flavor gets more neutral compared to butter. If you want it to get bigger and even softer, you can also add baking powder. You can also make it with all-purpose flour instead of cake flour. With that, the texture gets slightly firmer and crunchier. To conclude, if you want to make the softest cream puff, use only water and oil with maybe baking powder if you want. And to make the most firm texture, you can use milk, butter, and all-purpose flour, or maybe bread flour. Once you fill the cream inside, you need to store in the fridge. It is still edible for up to 5 days, but I do not recommend that. As it sets, the choux gets soggy inside and kind of dried outside. Pate choux is something that tastes the best when it's just made. So I recommend baking them and fill the cream right before you serve and enjoy the crispy choux and melty cream. Yes, after you pipe, put it in a freezer to just let them set completely. Put it in a Ziploc or airtight container, and I would say you can store in a freezer up to about a month. And when you use it, you do not have to defrost it. Bake them right away after applying egg wash. Play around with the temperature and the time. The baking time is gonna be longer. Yes, definitely yes. I think I covered most of the problems and solutions, but if you have questions, please drop them on the comment section below and I'll try to answer as many as possible. Alright, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Please let me know if it was helpful and if I could inspire you to try making it at home. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe for more videos all about beautiful and delicious pastries from scratch. Enjoy Pastry at Living, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.